class of 1970. A gentleman that has worked for the United States government for your career, correct? A gentleman is a graduate, and he's worked for the State Department of the United States of America's government. He was here about 10 years ago, and I remember it was my first year back at Regis, and it was a very intriguing conversation to hear what this gentleman does for a living, and it was kind of eye-opening in the sense of what the rest of the world is. I guess my message here is we go through our ordinary day and our ordinary life, and often we hear of things that happen on the other parts of the world, but at the same rate, though, we're very removed from it, we're not connected to it. So to have a story come to us from somebody that works for our nation's government, working on the other part of the world, and the other parts of the world are very intriguing and eye-opening. We share the planet with a lot of other people. We play out our part in our world, on our part of the planet, but we have to understand that globally we are a connected society, and certainly with the internet, we can fully understand that in a more realistic way. But today, it's my pleasure to be able to introduce Mr. Brian Goldbeck, the class of 1970.
Good morning. Can the folks in the back hear me? Got it back there okay? All right, great, thanks. Well, thank you, Mr. Peterson, and faculty and staff, and distinguished fellow students. I say fellow because, well, I guess it was a long time ago. I was sitting in those very same chairs, which I understand are not going to be there come another month or so. Next time you have a seat in here, look for my name. It'll be on one of the seats out there. My remarks today are off the record. They're strictly my personal views. I don't speak for the U.S. government, the U.S. State Department. I'm not attributable by name, organization, etc. Now, why do I do that? I do that because this will allow me to have a full, frank discussion with you, an exchange, without having to pull punches. Although I think you'll find that much of what I have to say does track very closely with U.S. policy. So in terms of what I'd like to do with the sort of hour that we have together today is I'd like to start first by offering about 15, 20 minutes worth of remarks, doing a slideshow, and this is the teaser on the screen here. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about careers at the State Department. And here, if you're interested in pursuing this, www.state.gov, that will get you there. Or if you do careers.state.gov, that's the one that really focuses on how to become what I've become, which is a U.S. diplomat. When I tell people I work for the State Department, most of the time they say, State Department of what? Transportation, forestry, agriculture? I say no, as in the U.S. State Department, diplomacy, international relations, foreign policy. They say, oh, that. Because it's very foreign. Yeah, most people don't have experience, they don't have an interaction with someone from the State Department. There are not very many of them. In terms of totals, there's really only about 13,000 people in the Foreign Service Corps altogether. Half of those are Foreign Service officers like me, and the other half are Foreign Service staff officers. Now, Foreign Service officers are focused on one of 5 basic disciplines: political, economic, consulate, in other words, doing visas and things, American Citizen Services, public affairs, and management, because you have to have somebody who runs the offices, the shop, the electricity, all that stuff. Now, on the Foreign Service Staff Corps, that's the side that does all of the things that makes it possible for the first 5 groups to do their job. And that includes things like the computer systems, communication systems, the healthcare operation, the beans and bullets to make the thing go. They have cars, lighting, heat, all of those things. That's what those 25 other disciplines are part of. In terms of, and that's really focused mostly on being outside the United States. That's why we have the word foreign here. If you wanted to stay domestic, you join the civil service, right? And you work domestically. And we have about 11,000 civil service staff members in the State Department altogether. Mostly in Washington, backstopping those people who are overseas. But also we have people out at passport offices, for example, in Minneapolis and about 15 other locations around the United States. So we're a small, relatively small operation. We have about 45,000 locally employed staff. So, for example, I just came out of Embassy Manila in the Philippines. We had just under 400 Americans assigned there altogether. And we had about 1,200 local staff, mostly Filipinos, who were working for us. And so they typically are the bulk of the population at our embassies overseas. We have diplomatic representation at about 180 out of 190 total countries worldwide. There are some countries we don't have embassies at, like North Korea, for example. There are some countries that we had embassies and they didn't, like Iran and Cuba, which are now being restored. But we have about 270 embassies, consulates, consuls, etc., altogether worldwide. So that's a pretty big spread. I say we have offices in almost every country, and that's sort of true. The State Department is, of course, the premier organization responsible for helping to serve as the advisory body and organization on foreign affairs and international relations for the United States. The Secretary of State is really the President's right-hand man. It has been women in the recent past as well. In terms of providing advice on what's happening in foreign affairs. It's a pyramidal-shaped organization, one Secretary of State at the top, 2 deputy secretaries, a gaggle of undersecretaries, and then a whole bunch of bureaus and agencies and departments. Now, you're not going to be able to see this, but this is a really busy organizational chart. And you have to ask yourself, why are there so many different bureaus and organizations in the State Department? And the answer to that is basically the State Department ends up dealing with issues that cover the gamut, cover the whole range of human endeavor, whether it's diseases like Ebola or SARS, all the way up to terrorism and war, energy, United Nations operations, you name it. Virtually everything that the U.S. has an interest in has a nexus, comes to roost at someplace in the State Department. And that's why we have such a large organizational structure and are active in so many different issues. We cover everything. We're especially focused on things like protecting U.S. interests and American citizens overseas. Now, what does the State Department do? And why does it matter to you? Well, I'm going to run off through a very short list very quickly. We create jobs. The State Department helps open doors. I was in China, in Beijing, researching all the barriers that China had to the import into China of U.S. goods and services, which the USTR, U.S. Trade Representative, then used to negotiate with the Chinese to get them to open the doors and make it possible for more U.S. goods to be sold there. That in turn helped create lots of additional jobs, 20 million U.S. jobs, for example. And the Department of Commerce has offices in our 70 largest markets overseas, but that just leaves, what, 110 or so uncovered markets. Where commerce isn't, state is. And so when I was in Yemen, I was the economic/commercial/agriculture officer. So I covered all of those disciplines, but it also meant that I was active trying to promote the sales of U.S. goods and services. One of the things I'm really proud of is when I arrived in Yemen in 1986, we were selling about $100,000 to the Yemenis each year. It's a relatively poor country. When I left, we were selling a little over 100 million, and most of that was agricultural products. So I started thinking, I thought about the farmers in the Midwest who were producing those products and then those were being exported overseas. And that was the way that we created jobs. We support American citizens overseas. So if you do have a run-in with the law, we're not going to get you out of jail, but we are going to give you a list of lawyers who might be able to help you get out of jail. If you're ill or sick, we'll give you a list of doctors so that you can get assistance that way. We also facilitate adoptions. So we had over 6,300 adoptions that the State Department facilitated from overseas to the United States. We're also active in child abduction cases, 1,300 of those last year. And we helped repatriate bring back to their families in the United States 374 American children. We promote democracy, foster stability around the world. We help to make the world a safer place. We negotiate arms control treaties, weapons of mass destruction, those kinds of issues, those kinds of challenges we work on so that it makes the world a safer place. We save lives, and that, I mean, we're active on everything from HIV/AIDS to Ebola. We help countries feed themselves. We help teach people how to raise crops, how to do better jobs at it, how to better preserve their crops. It's helping to feed the world. We're there in times of crisis, and I'll talk more about when I was the acting ambassador in the Philippines, when we had the world's, at the time, the largest typhoon ever to make landfall. Killed about 6,000 people, but more about that later. We promote the rule of law and protection of human dignity. And I kind of like to tie that back to Regis here, because one of my takeaways from my time here at Regis was the emphasis on humanity and on people, and on the importance of reaching out and helping other people. And so I took from my time at Regis that really strong message. We help Americans to see the world. We processed 14.1 million passports in 2014, 15.5 million passports this year in 2015. And we help foreigners come visit the United States, whether they're coming as students or for business purposes or because they want to see Disney World. I was in Disney World 2 weeks ago, and there were a lot of foreigners there enjoying Disney World. U.S. Tourism exports, although they're coming to the United States, it's hard to think of it as an export, but that's what it is. Well, it ran over $12 billion last year. It creates lots of jobs. And we are really the face of America overseas, because for a lot of people in these small countries or distant countries, we may be the only Americans that they will ever meet. And I can tell you that when I went out into the distant reaches of Mongolia, they only have 3 million people altogether in a space the size of Alaska, twice the size of Texas. Largest city is Ulaanbaatar, the capital, about 1 million people. And after that, it drops down to 100,000, and 40,000, and 20,000, and 10,000. And you can drive 200 miles and never see a person. You might see some cattle, but that's about it. It's a large open space. So when they get a chance to meet some of us, it's a chance for them to develop impressions about what the United States is. Now, I'm going to step away for a second and talk a little bit about my personal history. So I was born and raised down near Sparta, Antonia. And then my father passed away, and my mother moved here to Eau Claire to be near her brother and sister as part of her support system. And so my last 2 years were here at Regis, and I'm really deeply grateful for that experience. And I'm grateful because the instructors that I had here, I felt really cared about me as a person, about my personal growth and development, both intellectual and spiritual. And I was really grateful when I found out that religion classes here weren't rote memorization of Baltimore Catechism, which I had plenty of in my home, in my small town, but rather it was exploring our own attitudes and our own ideas, helping us to reach conclusions about how we think we should live ethically, morally, etc. So finished 2 years here, went down to the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire, where I was focused on pre-law. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do pre-law and domestic politics. That's going to be where I'm going to focus. And so I started doing that in the summer of 72. And then summer of 72, spring of 72, the department chairman, who was my advisor, Dr. Robert Gibbon, he said, Brian, there's a United Nations summer study program that's run through the University of Milwaukee. You should go do it. It's a summer in New York. And I said, gosh, boss, you know, I'm a pre-law major. I'm focused on domestic politics. Stay away from me with international relations. It's not interesting. It's not what I want to do. He said, oh, shut up and just do it. You know, it'd be good for you. After all, it's going to be the summer in New York City. What could be bad about that? You could spend the whole summer in New York. So I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. You know. So off I went. I had just an amazing experience. And the way the program was set up was sort of point, counterpoint. So in the morning, for example, we'd have someone from the Israeli embassy come and talk to us about Israel's perspective and its rights and its viewpoints and concerns. And then in the afternoon, we'd have someone from the Palestinian organization come and talk about what their interests and concerns are. So you got to hear kind of both sides of the argument. Now, not in the room at the same time, right? Because they didn't get along, but we did hear the different perspectives. I was working on a term paper on conventional weapons sales, tanks and airplanes and things like that. So I got to go to, then it was the Shah of Iran's embassy in New York, and talk to them. And I went in and asked them questions about their arms sales. I got this. I said, now what about Iraqi arms sales? Now they talk nonstop for an hour. Okay. When I go to the Iraqi embassy, of course, they don't want to talk about their arms sales. They want to talk about Iran's arms sales. So you get them talking about each other, and that's how you kind of collect information and get ideas about what's going on. Fascinating program. I turned around and came back to Eau Claire and said, shifting gears, not going towards domestic policy anymore and law, but instead I'm going to do foreign policy and international relations, and I'd like to be a foreign service officer. I got that idea because we went to the United Nations, the U.S. mission to the United Nations, across the street from the UN. And we had a chance to meet with our ambassador, U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, a guy by the name of George Walker Bush. Yeah, later became president, not much later actually. So I thought, wow, interesting guy, fascinating hour with him. This is what I want to do. Took the test and failed. And I said, oh, what's wrong with this picture? And I said, so I did some research, right? Got to find out what's going wrong here. Most of the people entering were 25 or older. I was not quite 21. Most of them spoke one or more foreign languages. I spoke English with an Elroy, Sparta, and Eau Claire accent. Most of them had lived overseas someplace. Well, I visited Canada a few times. Most of them had worked in the government or some form of government at one point, either the Peace Corps or in the military or some other organization, and I had like none of the above. And so I very deliberately sat down and said, how do I get the above? And started assembling those things, and 10 years later, after I got all of the above, including a master's degree, then I was finally able to pass the test. So 13,000 of us took the test in 1979 when I passed, and 280 of us got jobs. Now you got to say that's pretty disappointing, huh? I mean, when you look at the numbers, you say there's 13,000 people taking this test. What are the odds that I'm going to be one of the 280 that's selected? And the answer is, why not me? Why not you? Really? And I said, why should I not be one of those 280? And so I did all the homework, did all the hard work. As Vince Lombardi used to say, the only place that work appears before, that success appears before work is in the dictionary, right? So I did all my hard work, and then I came on board. And it took a while to get on board, but eventually I did. And now I'm wrapping up shortly a 32-and-a-half-year career with the State Department. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to have a chance for a question and answer and a dialogue, okay? And here I'll just preview that a bit. When I was in Mongolia, and I was speaking to groups like this, what I found was Mongolians are wonderful people, but they're a little shy. A little shy. I'd say, okay, anybody got a question now, or a comment that they'd like to make? Why? Everybody's looking around at each other. And one thing Americans can't take is silence. We really can't take silence. We want to get on, engage. And so then finally some brave soul would raise his or her hand, and then another one would raise her hand. And then pretty soon everybody's got both hands up. Now we've got a lot of questions for the right time. So that's my way of saying, take the Mongolian out of you today. Okay? Take it out. And be ready with your questions or your comments or your concerns when we get to the Q&A session. So what I've assembled by way of slideshow, and I'll confess right away, these are all, I can do this because it's a segment of making more money. These are borrowed from the internet, okay? Some of them are mine, but all of my stuff is in storage at the moment. We'll catch up with you eventually. So this is what my first place looked like, which was Seoul, South Korea, about 1984. This is upper middle class housing in Seoul. There were large-scale demonstrations against the United States because we were supporting the existing regime, which was a military-controlled authoritarian system. All of that meant that we would get all kinds of problems, protests, etc., when kids would come to our space. And we had, in some cases, they had as many as 500,000 students march in the streets at a time. And they put something like 40,000 police out there to try to manage and control these demonstrations. This is the city square in downtown Seoul. And this is what the guards look like. They look like sort of like Darth Vader, right? I mean, that's kind of the look. But you see the riot shields and everything, and this is sometimes what I had to walk through to go to work in '84. Korea is a stunningly beautiful place. This is a temple in Gyeongju, the old capital of the southeast. Moving on, this is Yemen. So I went from Seoul to Sana'a, okay, and then North Yemen. You can see these kinds of gingerbread houses. Actually credit Yemen with being one of the first to create the high-rise architecture. Unfortunately, a lot of this doesn't look as healthy today following the strike that's there now. One of the things I got to do was, Yemen discovered oil. Of course it's in the wrong place. You know, it's on the wrong side of two sets of mountains in the middle of the desert. So they had to build an oil pipeline. I got to watch that whole process, report on that whole process as it went through. And they, rather than building an oil terminal, they just bought, or rented actually, this big oil tanker and hooked the pipeline up to that. And that began the process of oil exports. Dirt poor country, $797 per capita GDP. That's probably your cell phone cost per year. This is a major activity. The green things you see on the floor is a leaf called gat or pot, and it's a sort of a semi-narcotic in a way. And what they do is they chew it. You see the big cut in their cheeks. They'll go home for lunch. They'll have a big lunch. They'll sit around in the afternoon, and this is where all the business gets done. So if I go to these events, I get to learn all about what's happening in the business community. Chewing like this, you take off the soft leaves and you chew it. I would describe it as being socially addictive, not so much probably physically addictive. That's Brian's personal description of it. But it's like drinking 8 double espressos. You know, you just get wired like that. On to Beijing. When I got there, most people rode bicycles, and this is a pretty common scene, which you see more people on bicycles than in cars. Yeah, unfortunately, this is one of the things that really took a hit. The environment in Beijing is just awful. You may have seen press reports in the last couple of weeks of smog being so bad that it's 25 times the maximum allowable dosage. We put up smog meters in our embassies and put the information up on the website and really provoked the Chinese because it showed how poorly they were managing their environment. But it is a stunningly beautiful city with all kinds of things to see. Here's Tiananmen Square and the Temple of Heaven. On to Hong Kong. This was in 1997 in July. Hong Kong reverted from British control to Chinese sovereignty. Now, 150 years earlier, during the Opium Wars, the British beat the Chinese in battle. And so they got Hong Kong Island in perpetuity, forever. And then they realized they couldn't really defend that island if you didn't have control of the land area next to it. So in the next war, they got an agreement for 150 years of control of that next piece of territory that overlooks or looks upon Hong Kong Island. Well, 150 years sounds like a long time, doesn't it? Sure, 15 to 18. But, when 150 years goes like that, in 97, the lease ran out. And so the Brits, the Chinese said, thank you very much, we're taking it back. And when the Brits realized that they couldn't support it anymore, they agreed to hand it over, give it back, all of Hong Kong. But they got an agreement that for 50 years, Hong Kong would have a high degree of autonomy. Beijing would control national defense, foreign affairs, those sovereignty issues that define nationhood. But everything else controlled internally would be Hong Kong's. And this was the ceremony conducted in Hong Kong. And you see the British flag and the Hong Kong flag there. The British governor got on the naval vessel and sailed off, and as it sailed off, the rain came down, gentle rain came down, and the Brits said, well, it was tears of sadness with the British leaving Hong Kong, and the Chinese said they were tears of joy. You know, finally Hong Kong is coming back to Chinese control. And that's what Hong Kong looks like from above, up on the top of the peak. It's a stunning city of about 7 million people. This from a kid who came from a town of 575 people. It's a great city. This is Macau, the tower there. My nephew, when he came to visit, he walked around the top of the tower. Talk about it, there's an adrenaline rush for you. But it's a casino city, and that's really how it got its name and how it made a lot of money. It belonged to the Portuguese, and they agreed to give Macau back to China in January 1998. And now this is a new, U.S. casinos have moved in a big way. And in 3 years, Macau surpassed Las Vegas in terms of the amount of revenues coming from gambling. The facade of St. Paul's was a church. It was burned out, bombed out. The central square, you can see the influence of the Portuguese, Spanish architecture and design. Really amazing architectural work. On to North Korea. No, I've not been to North Korea, but I was back in Seoul from 2000 to 2003 working on North Korea issues. And here's, this is Kim Jong-il up in the top there. They have dynastic communism. I've never heard of that before. You know? Big Daddy, Kim Il-sung was the first Kim Jong-il the second, Kim Jong-un the new one. You know. But it's a militarized state with nuclear weapons, and that's scary. And this is a satellite photograph just to characterize the difference between the North and the South. A nighttime photograph of what the difference is, and you can imagine what the quality of light in the South tells you about economic activity as opposed to the North. The one little bright light there is Pyongyang, the capital, where of course everything is hunky-dory. Back to Seoul, I was there for the 2002 World Cup. These are not protesters, these are soccer crazies. And so they had 1 million people come back down the square. It's that same square you saw earlier filled with protesters, but now they're celebrating soccer. And Korea made it to the final 16, and they thought they would never get that far. Let's see. So, moving on now to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. About 75 million people, again, a space the size of, twice the size of Texas. $97 per capita GDP when I was there, per year. $97. It means most people live a subsistence life. They live on farms. They don't travel far from home. They don't buy much. But this is what the capital city ran, about 7 million. Lalibela, these are rock-hewn churches. So if you imagine this rock being just one solid piece, and then between the 6th and 12th centuries, using hand tools, they carved these rock-hewn churches, which speaks to you something about commitment to the religion that they had there. Now this is Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity. They also have a very large Muslim population. Used to describe Ethiopia as a Christian island in a Muslim sea. Now, actually, Muslims outnumber the Christians, so it's getting more like the rest of the Middle East. But these are priests on the exit. Sorry, the picture's not too good, but this is Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, the capital, and looking down from the State Department store. No, we don't have a department store. But Mongolia used to be under Soviet control from basically 1911 to 1990. And so the state controls everything in the old days until 1990 when the Soviets left because their own country was crumbling and communism as a theology, as a philosophy, ceased to have much emphasis. Mongolia is a large open space. And I had a friend from Korea that I took on a trip, and you come over the top of a ridgeline, you look down a valley, and the valley would be 30 to 50 miles long and 15 miles wide, and there would be one ger or yurt like this felt sitting out there, and maybe 20, 30 head of cattle. And we go to the next brim and we look out there and do the same thing. After a while he said, I'm really nervous. There's 14 million people in Seoul, and you can't turn around without bumping into somebody. There's nobody out here. What happens if a car breaks down? What happens if, I said, calm down. Car breaks down, one of these guys on a horse will come over and invite you into his house to spend the night and feed you and all that. Just don't worry about it. About 80 to 90% Buddhist. This is Kafran, which was Genghis Khan's old capital. The Mongolians conquered basically all of Asia, all the way up to Eastern Europe, and all the way south into the Middle East, including Iraq. And they said, we've been to Iraq before. So, let's see. Guangzhou. I was the consul general in Guangzhou. We had about 150 Americans and 300 local staff working for us. To put it in perspective, we covered 4 provinces, 4 states in South China, the ones adjacent to Hong Kong. 300 million people in those four states, in 4 provinces. In other words, the equivalent of the United States. 46 cities and more than 1 million. How many in the U.S.? 9 cities and more than 1 million. So it's really a dense, packed place. This is the Guangzhou Tower. There's a Ferris wheel up on the top of there if you've got a strong stomach. And we can refer to this bridge here as a toilet bowl. But this is really what South China is about. It's about electronics, it's about manufacturing. Walmart, you know Walmart, right? They source from Shenzhen in South China to 50,000 factories in South China. You say, wow, 50,000 factories. Well, that's just 1/9 of the 450,000 in one province alone. So it's phenomenal the amount of productivity there. So this is what the embassy looks like in Manila. This is where I worked the last 3 years. And this is what a big typhoon looks like when it's coming at you. This is a big typhoon. So the islands on the left, that's the Philippines. 7,106 islands altogether, about 100 million people. And let's see, Manila is right up in here. Here's Manila Bay. Anybody study their history? Yeah. Dewey sailed in there, sunk the Spanish fleet, and the U.S. ended up colonizing the Philippines for about 50 years. Anyway, this huge typhoon is coming in. It's going to hit right in here, which is Leyte, which is where General MacArthur landed during World War II. And there's the track when we saw it coming. So it's not like it's a surprise. But with the enormity of it when it hit, with a 20 to 30 foot wall of water and winds at 200 miles an hour, that's what really got people's attention. And that's the result. 90%, this is a city called Tacloban, about 275,000 people. 90% of all the houses destroyed. No water, no electricity, hospitals were out, no communications, the whole mobile phone system went dead. All of the fuel was gone because there was a wall of seawater rushed in from the ocean, pushed by the typhoon. It contaminated all of the gasoline sources. So this was the challenge that we faced in terms of trying to respond. As I mentioned before, 6,000 people killed, several hundred more missing, 11.4 million people affected altogether, and the U.S. really rose to the day. More about that in a bit. And there I am giving a speech or addressing the press in Manila, answering the questions that the press has about the U.S. support for cooperation. U.S. Agency for International Development Director is here. Here's our Public Affairs Director, trying to manage the press. Here's the head of the Philippine military organization that was helping out with that. So, I think maybe I'll stop here, and I'll take questions and comments now that everybody's gotten the Mongolian this time. Please.
How much money do you get every year?
Sure. The salary range, that's a fair question. The salary range starts at the entry level, meaning kind of no experience, starts at about 40,000, and then maxes out at about 195,000. You can't make more than the president. that would get boring, right? So, and now they're giving you credit if you come in with language skills. So if you come in with a hard language like Chinese or Russian or Arabic, like that, you can actually make more money on that. And it's as I said, it's a pyramidal structure. The State Department says, we'll guarantee you a 27-year career, but it is up or out. Each stage along the line, you have a certain number of years that you have to get promoted. If you can't get promoted, then you probably don't belong there. And it's time to get out. 65 years old and you're out in the foreign service, whereas in the civil service, you can stay and die in your chair. I mean, there are people that work out to 90 and 100 in the civil service. How many languages do I speak? I still have some challenge with English, but I'm working on it. I guess right now I would say my best language is Mandarin Chinese, because I've had the most experience with that. And what does that mean? It means I can hold a college-level discussion on key topics of interest to the United States, like trade, nuclear weapons, culture. Don't ask me to talk with the maid or word of dinner. That's a little bit risky. And then probably Korean after that, and then probably Arabic. And then I've got really low-level quality Mongolian and hard, which is Ethiopian. Question in the back. Yes, sir.
How well do you speak Korean?
How well do I speak Korean? It's not as good. It was better before when I didn't have Chinese superimposed over the top of it. But Isoyo ni yogi shasha wa dama sansa hakami.
Well, I can't hear you super talking. What?
Isoyo, I can't say it too slow. Isoyo sashwa dama sansa hakami. You swear that everything you say or are written here is true.
Dead.
So. I'm convinced that when I'm sitting in an old folks' home at some point, I'm going to be sitting there doing these sort of things. What is he saying? Other questions or comments?
Were you required to be proficient in those languages before you went to those countries, or did you learn a lot before you went?
Okay. Well, the question was, did I have to know those languages before I came in, or did I get them while I was there? And actually, you don't even have to have a high school degree to do the foreign service. And they'll train you to do whatever it is they want if they're going to send you somewhere. Now, obviously, if you already have the skills, that's an advantage. And it's cheaper for them, because to send you to study, I studied Chinese for 2 years. 1 year in Washington and 1 year in Taipei. That meant that when I finished, I could read 4,500 characters, Chinese characters. So, that's a lot of work. And then I'm memorizing 30 characters a day, basically. Every day, 5 days a week, and I have to remember the ones that I studied before, So it's a challenge to learn the languages, but they'll give you all the languages that you need. They'll teach you the languages if you don't already bring them to the table with you. But as I said, now if you have those languages, you actually can make more money on entry. And once I learned Chinese the first time, when I wanted to take a second job in Hong Kong, there were 40 competitors for that job. But the fact that I already had Chinese meant that I was cheap. They didn't have to teach someone again to speak the language. So I was more competitive. So people sometimes ask, how do you get the jobs? Well, the way I describe it is at a given rank, there's like 40, for example, in my rank, there's 40 jobs and 40 people, okay? At the end of the day, there's going to be 40 pegs and 40 holes. Not all the pegs will like the hole they've been given. Not all the holes will like the peg they've been given. But there will be 40 pegs and 40 holes. You're committed to serving anywhere in the world, worldwide service. And that means if it's your turn to go to Afghanistan, it's your turn. So we are expected to serve worldwide and take the good posts and the bad posts. We usually say our ambassadorships are usually about 60% are professionals like me. We used to say if it's dirty, dangerous, or disgusting, it's professional. If it's got a nice house and a golf course, then it's political. Being the president will appoint political appointees to that job. Other questions, comments, please? Oh yeah. Yeah, balancing family with the job is really a challenge. I'll confess, divorce is a common malady for us. Alcoholism is another one. When I was working on North Korea issues, I was working 60 to 80-hour work weeks, continuously for almost 3 years. Fascinating work, but just exhausting. And you have to maintain some balance. You have to find some time, to work with family and to do things with your family. And the sad part is, I missed out on a lot of things that my nephew and niece did here in the United States, like the high school graduations or their piano recitals or soccer matches and things that I couldn't participate in as their uncle because I was 8,000 miles away. There is a lot more emphasis on work-life balance in the State Department today than there was before. When I first came on board, their attitude, they actually evaluated the spouse along with the employee. So you got a critique of your wife, whether she did a good job or not as a foreign service spouse. And they decided that was maybe not fair and not appropriate. And so finally they separated out of it and said, hey, you don't talk about the family life, you just talk about the employee and their performance. We have jobs for family members. If your spouse wants to work or your partner wants to work, those jobs aren't always the best of jobs, aren't always the highest paying job. In a lot of places we go, there's no agreement, no labor agreement. So if there's no labor agreement, then usually the spouse can only work in the embassy or other embassies. United Nations organizations are usually local schools, international schools like that. So it's a challenge, and this job is not for everyone. You're going to pick up and move every 2 or 3 years. The most I moved was 3 times in 2 years. The longest I spent in any one place since I was 16 was 4 years in Hong Kong. That's challenging, but I am a stimulus junkie. So I thrive on challenge, I thrive on going someplace and figuring it out. Meeting people and understanding, that's what I really enjoy. So I found that the 4th year in Hong Kong, I was efficient. I knew everybody, I knew the issues, I could really hone in and get the work done quickly, but I wasn't growing. I wasn't challenged anymore. And I wasn't having the stimulation that I found I need. That answer your question? So, okay. Please.
You ever get vacation?
Yes. Not only do you, it's mandated. We're required by Congress in between overseas assignments to spend at least 20 work days in the United States. Why? 2 reasons. One is it helps you to acclimate and go do all the things that I always do when I come back here in the summer, which is eyes, ears, nose, throat. Get your eyes checked, you get your teeth checked, you do all that stuff. But you can't, I wouldn't go to a Yemen doctor in Yemen. The quality of facilities and care is just there. So come back here and do that. So every 2 or 3 years you're going to get one of those, and then depending upon how long you've been in the service, when you first come in you get 4 hours every 2 weeks. So it means basically a day a month. 12 days accumulated over a year, and more than 13 actually. The hard part is you can't take leave while you're in training, so you accumulate a whole bunch of annual leave. Once in a while that works out really well. When I was in Yemen, my boss wouldn't let me take any vacation because he was afraid somebody in Washington would ask a question that he wouldn't know the answer to about economics or commerce or agriculture. I said, they don't even know we're here. They don't care. Who's going to ask a question? Call me up. I'll be on the phone. He wouldn't let me take vacation. So I accumulated like 90 vacation days over the course of that time there. And then the next summer, when I finished with my econ training, I had a whole bunch of time, and so I called him up and I said, if it's okay with you, I'm going to take 60 days off and drive around the United States. So I drove from Washington, D.C. to Wisconsin, visit family, buy my Packer memorabilia. Then I went out to Yellowstone, then drove up into Canada, and then went down along the U.S. West Coast and along the South, all the way back out to the Atlantic, and then back up to Washington, D.C. 10,000 miles in 70 days, 60% camping. Wonderful. Who was going to get time like that ever, to take time off and do that? How many overall years of schooling? That's a really good point because, 3 years of my undergraduate degree, first undergraduate degree, year and a half for my second undergraduate degree in education. I went to Saudi Arabia as a teacher for 4 years. And then I did 1 year of training in Washington when I first came on board, 2 years of Chinese, a year of economics, the JAM, a master's degree of economics in 9 months, 2 300-page books every 2 weeks, like that. 1 year of Chinese refresher, and then short courses of like 2 to 4 weeks, almost every other year for training along the way. So I would say probably, of my 32 years, probably 5 of that is spent in training. Here there's a difference between the State Department and the military. If the military has 4 jobs, they hire 5 people. 1 person's always in training. State Department doesn't have a training float. So if you've got 4 people, you have 4 jobs, and one of them is in language training, you're doing 4 jobs with 3 people. And it means you almost always have a gap that you're dealing with. And you just work everybody else harder. So I can say that as a manager. There's another question. One of the better places? I mean, for me, Mongolia was one of the best places. And I'm not saying that because my wife's Mongolian, but that's one of the reasons. She's definitely one of the reasons. But our relationship with Mongolia is wonderful. We're what they call a third neighbor. Poor Mongolia is sandwiched in between Russia and China. I always say they chose poorly in terms of location. But they agree with us on many things. They see eye to eye with us. They have a lot of the same values that we have. We don't have very many large issues with them, but they're a small, relatively small country. They have 300 people altogether in their State Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. 300 to cover the whole world and the home space. So we have a good relationship. When the Soviets left in 1990, the U.S. stepped in and provided assistance, provided food aid. And I think my estimate is that we saved probably 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 Mongolian lives by stepping into the food. They like us. When 9/11 happened, Mongolia was one of the first countries to step forward and offer troops in support of those operations. And the president told our president, the time to help your friend is when your friend needs the help, not when it's convenient for you. Now that's an help. That's an help. I don't want to keep you beyond your time here, but. Sorry? The best food, Korea. South Korean food is just wonderful. I mean, they believe in variety, okay? So for Koreans, if you go to a Korean restaurant, they'll have 2 or 3 main dishes, something like beef, barbecue beef, something like that. And then they'll have anywhere from 6 to 20 small side dishes. And you compare that to when I invite them to my house for lunches, beef, meat, a starch, a veggie, a dessert. And they look down and say, 4 things, that's it? This is the most powerful, richest country, one of the richest countries in the world. Okay, only got 4 things to eat. So that's my favorite of the places I've served. Please.
Can I ask you a question in Korean?
Well, you can try.
한국에서 얼마 동안 일을 했습니까?
2년 man.
2년이요?
So he asked me how long did I work in, did I live in Korea, and I said 2 years. That was the first term. Second one was 3 years. You get him to invite you over to his house for dinner. Okay, I'll take perhaps one last question and we'll wrap it up.
What's your favorite Filipino dish?
Favorite Filipino dish? Wow, that's a good question. There's a lot of good Filipino. It's adobo probably. Yeah, adobo. You can do it with chicken, you can do it with pork, almost anything. Okay. So, that's good one more, I guess. The question is, have I ever been in danger? I got death threats in Yemen, and I got death threats when I came back to the United States from Yemen. But they weren't death threats from terrorism. They were death threats because I brought chicken feed to Yemen, American chicken feed. And so this was competing with all of the existing sellers of chicken feed. And so I was disrupting the natural order of all of the rich people who were selling those products. And so, you know, people weren't happy with me when they did that, so too bad. So, careers.state.gov is the place to go if you're interested in this. I'm happy to take other questions or to meet again with people if they're interested. But I will charge you again to say, you know, why not me? And if maybe it's not the foreign service, maybe it's something else. Whatever profession, whatever job, find what excites you. Find what makes you feel good. Find what you think will stimulate you and make you excited to go to work every day. Find that thing and go do it. And don't be afraid to try and fail, get up and try again. The question about education, you know, you're going to have to retool every 5 to 7 years. That's the nature of the world we're in today. You know, it's not a case anymore where you can learn how to do one thing. You can do that from 20 until you get your gold watch at 65. You're going to have to learn how to adjust and learn new skills, and that's one of the things I think that leaders did really well, which was helping them learn how to learn. Learn how to learn. At the same time, helping you to be a better person. Thank you very much. Called Inside the U.S. Embassy, and it's essays. So if you're interested in what a political officer does or a commercial officer does, you can read it here. The back couple of chapters talks about how you get in, what the process is, the test taking and all of that stuff. I recommend it. You'll find an older edition that I donated to the Readers Library 10 years ago. And this I'll present to your